too quick, but we have a great update from the airport. I'm sure you've been following what has been going on at the airport. And you see the pretty pictures and the buildings, but there's a plan behind it. So, Connor and his gang of consultants talk about Matt Cannon, by the way. Matt Cannon said that he is not going to speak. We've got $25 bet running on that. So but we'll get an update on the Albany master plan. So without further ado, we need a motion to accept the minutes from way back in June, after June 1.
Make a motion.
Second it.
Lori.
Got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, usually I just roll right past that. Assume that you're good with that. You want to do the airport or do you want to do the action items and then?
Oh, we can do the airport presentation first because I believe they do want to leave. So we're gonna turn it over to Connor.
Connor, it's all yours.
You're staying.
You're staying. Oh, boy.
Sorry, I didn't mean to call you guys out.
Sorry, yeah, good
Dad, you
afternoon.
gotta stay too.
Good afternoon, everyone. Connor Haspin, Chief Planner with the Albany International Airport. Thankful to have CHA here to give an update to everyone on our airport master plan update. The first airport master plan in about 30 years of the airport's history. So just excited to give that update, and then I'm going to have Paul McDonald give the majority of the presentation, and we can answer any questions at the end if y'all have some. So I'll hand it over to Paul. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, all right, I'll just stand so you can see me a little better. Okay, the Albany Airport Master Plan, today's date. Next slide, please. We started this master plan when COVID was going strong. It took us a little while to get going, but now we've really come through and we're going to be wrapping it up this year. So we'll have a new master plan done. There's nothing secret about the master plan. Everything is public and it follows the FAA process. But it's also very similar to any facility plan. We have guidelines and development for modernization of the airport. Everything's based on FAA standards. We need to support future aviation demand. It's a long-range plan. We've got a lot of short-term projects. The projects going out 20 years and even beyond 20 years are on our list. FAA recommends we're updating the master plan every 10 years, but they haven't done it here in Albany County for about 30 years. So it was overdue, and it's required by FAA. Next, here's the flow chart of the various tasks. You could use almost the same flow chart for any industrial complex, college campus, or anything. And we're really approaching the end here. Internally, we have a recommended plan that we're working with the airport authority on right now. So this fall, we'll be presenting it, refining and presenting it to the public. If you happen to come to one of our committee meetings, or the first public meeting, you'll already seen a good portion of the master plan. Along the bottom, you see the stakeholders and the community engagement. The airport had a pretty robust program, still has a pretty robust program. We've had 3 advisory committee meetings with people throughout the community, 3 technical advisory committee meetings with airport tenants, users, and staff, as well as the first of 2 public meetings. Next, please. Okay, I want to set the employment forecasts or forecasts of the airport. At a commercial airport, the most important criteria are the number of passenger boardings. So every time a passenger gets on the plane, there's 1 employment, and that's what the FAA reported, and that's a key forecast. The other forecasts all follow that employment forecast. It's aggressive. This is an aggressive growth forecast. It's in line with what FAA believes as well. But it's unconstrained. Fuel prices could impact it. Airline issues could impact it. There's a lot of impacts that could happen. But if you look at 2019, about 1.5 million annual passengers. Bottom line, from an unconstrained standpoint, 20 years from now, 2.1 million. We don't know if it'll get that high, but our philosophy has been make sure you plan for everything, but you only build facilities you need based on actual activity occurring. Okay, next please. Airfield development. It's mostly an on-airport plan. This is the stuff the FAA goes into in detail. You can see the two runways. There's an east-west runway and there's a north-south runway. And we spent a lot of time working with FAA on those runway facilities, taxiways, design standard changes, which are all invisible to the flying public. They're very important to the FAA. So we have a lot of recommendations for that over a 20-year period. The main one is a second parallel taxiway to the main runway. The purpose of that is to foster and enable development on the opposite side of the main runway. When you're in the terminal building, you are on the west side of the airport. That's where the taxiway is now. Ultimately, we want to see a taxiway on the east side of the airport to better enable development of that side. Next. Okay, what's been in the news lately is a project that came out of the master plan. When we started the master plan process, there was some opportunities coming up for additional funding, atypical funding. The biggest opportunity was from New York State DOT, and that was an upstate funding plan, which was a competition. The other opportunities that were coming up were additional funding come out of FAA from the Build Back Better or from the bipartisan infrastructure bill that's been available to the airport. So we turned our schedule a little bit on its head, whereas we needed to look at the recommendations first. Now, how do you do that without a forecast? You don't. You look at what you need right now. Back in 2019, that's our pre-COVID base year that we use, with that 1.5 million passengers. There was a lot of constraints and congestion at the airport, particularly in the terminal building right in front of the checkpoint. After the checkpoint, going up the escalator, that was a bottleneck that we knew, even with the current activity levels from 2019, that needs to be improved. So we started working on that improvement project at the very beginning of the master plan, and turning that around enabled the airport to receive a big grant from the state, through the New York State DOT, to do their terminal checkpoint project. And that's what you're seeing here. We've already started construction on this project, even though the master plan is not done. So that's a little atypical, but it's good in our opinion. So the passenger boarding connector that connects the garage to the terminal building, that's going to be torn down and replaced with actual usable terminal space. Next slide. This is a rendering that Governor Hochul presented just I think 2.5 weeks ago at the airport, tearing down the little bridge on the top and building real internal space to eliminate that congestion in front of TSA checkpoint and expand all that area. And we go to the next slide. Here's an internal view. If you were on that bridge now, this is what that would turn into in the future. A second project you'll probably start hearing about that came out of the master plan, but we're still seeking funding on it now from FAA, is an improvement to Concourse A. Concourse A is the oldest portion of the existing terminal building, so much so that it's got 4 passenger boarding bridges, or what we call jet bays. But it's also got gates on the lower level. You may remember going downstairs and walking out on the tarmac and boarding a plane with a little staircase. Those planes have been gone for a long time now, so those gates are unused. So if you look on the right side, you can see on that same concourse of adding 2 passenger boarding bridges for 6 real gates for a jet aircraft. So that project was recommended and is also ongoing, even though the master plan is not quite done yet. Okay, yeah, it's under design. The funding is not in place for that just yet, but the terminal building work is already underway. With this group, I did want to hit on parking. One of the other shortcomings that we identified right away was parking. Even for the 1.5 million employments, during holiday periods, the parking lots would fill up. And even when they're close to full, when you're trying to get on a plane, it causes problem for passengers of looking for spaces and not knowing where to go, and a lot of tourist market in Albany, coming out to go to other places. They're not used to coming to the airport all the time. So parking became a problem in all the busy periods. So there's about 7,000 parking spaces at the airport now. That's a lot of spaces. And it's a big revenue source for the airport as well. And I'm listing all the lots. I'm not going to go through it, but we have some recommendations, including the short term for parking. One of the things we're looking at is the potential future parking garages down the road. The initial thing we're really looking at is additional flat lots for the immediate need. But you'll see in the master plan, the potential for up to 2 new garages. We don't think they need 2 new garages, but if activity did come to fruition as the best case scenario, you might 20 years from now. So those are 2 options with, adding up to 3,000 parking spaces if they were both built with a 20-year forecast of 10,000 spaces. That's a lot of spaces. We see a lot of parking demand at most of these smaller airports, where everyone has a car and everyone's used to driving everywhere. And parking becomes a big issue. Next slide. All right, now I'm moving over to the economy lot. If you're familiar with that lot, it's right after the exit, the new exit 3. The entrance is in that location, and that has hundreds of positions, but we think you could probably expand it at least another 500 spaces using property the airport already owns. That would have to be improved, but it's already mostly impervious. So it's sort of a short-term stopgap measure we're thinking of in the next 5 years. After that, if activity does grow, then maybe an additional garage down the line. Okay, we're also looking at on airport, all the roadways and all the connections. Another congestion point can be the curb frontage right along the terminal building. Most of the time it's fine. If you're coming at that peak period, it's jammed up. And we're actually looking at adding a second curb frontage through the existing complex. Keep the one along the terminal building for private vehicles and have one down the center for commercial vehicles, buses, Uber and Lyft, shuttle services to hotels, and move all that commercial traffic to a different row through the terminal complex. We're also looking at, would it be feasible to have all the entrance coming from the south and having everyone exit to the north? Right now, it goes in both directions at the main entrance. And we're looking at, the possibility of changing that down the road. Next. This is just a zoom in of that same diagram. The red line in the middle could be that commercial driveway down the center. What we're showing down at where we labeled the entrance plaza, thinking of making that in only instead of both in and out. And then the exit would be where all the exits would be towards the north to keep that circular flow in a counterclockwise direction. So that's what we're looking at in terms of on airport. All that could be done on the airport property without coming out onto the county roadway. Next. This intersection, this is the main intersection I was talking about. On the left is the overall view. On the right is a zoomed in view of the entrance. What's new on that since COVID is the new parking garage. The new parking garage is a smaller garage, only 1,000 spaces. And it has its own entrance now, which is good and convenient for the public. But when we designed that and built that, we had to do a somewhat complex roadway configuration in there. So we've started on looking at how you can improve that, how you can fix that. And one of the potential ideas is that one way in this direction. It does front right on Albany Shaker Road, or this, I won't even say it, on 155. So you could also potentially consider improving that intersection as well. which is not owned by the airport, it's a county road. So integration and then working with the county, might be a good idea in the next 5 years. This is sort of what we're putting in the plan. Consider working on that intersection, see what the options might be. This is the overall picture. You can see just a couple of highlights is down the left side. This was presented at the public meeting. The next set of meetings is going to more formalize this, just a little fine tuning. But we're showing, potential improvements everywhere. On the lower half, that's the west side of the airport where the terminal is. It shows on there potential improvements to concourses and garages, which may or may not happen based on demand. On the top side of that figure, that's the east side. You can see most of the new development for cargo, for corporate, for MRO facilities, and repair facilities. All that's kind of lined up in that location of the airport. That's the only area the airport really has left. The development on the west side is all infill, which is good from some standpoints, but there's no expansion capability to bring in new users or any new hangars or any new large developments on the terminal side of the airport. There's just no space left. Okay, next. So what does it mean for access and parking? We have some potential recommendations for off the airport. And that's, a traffic study post-COVID with the new garage and the new configuration in place now. We're almost back to where we were before COVID, about 1.3, 1.4 million passengers now. We'll see what happens in 2024, which will be, we're considering that the first full post-COVID year. And traffic and patterns might be of interest to the community as a whole. A future access study, what I'm drawing on the right, the county might, or DOT might call that a corridor plan. The airport's not allowed to spend money off the airport, sort of an FAA trick. So doing some sort of traffic study or corridor plan, the airport would like to participate if that was to happen in the future, but couldn't be the sole funder for an off-airport study with the controls on that. So potential, I think I answered all this. The enhanced traffic management systems, really talking about the lighting and the timing of that main intersection, of studying that and looking how to best improve in the future. And with that, I kind of already said this, that we're looking to wrap up in the fall. We'll have a full master plan report. We have a website we're going to post it on. That ALP drawing set, that's a set of technical drawings. That's for the FAA, for them to review. And we do have final meetings. The advisory committee meetings, we'll have another set of those and one more public meeting. But the philosophy of the whole plan is don't wait around to be done. Start seeking implementation as soon as possible and plan for everything, but just build as you need it. That's all I
Thanks,
have.
Paul. Any questions for Paul or Connor or Matt? About the airport plans, and we hear about it pretty much every meeting.
You told me to ask Matt a question, so yes.
Yeah. That's okay, he already lost. Here enough, thanks, guys.
I'm real quick.
Tom, it's Larry Schillinger. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Am I being heard?
Yes. Can you hear us?
I just wanted to share a thought. And the disclaimer is this is just my own personal thought, not on behalf of the entity which I represent, which is the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. Airports throughout the world make a statement, particularly to visitors who haven't been to that area before. And I've had this concept in my head that, if the Albany International Airport wanted to make a statement, it would be something along the lines that captures the region's vitality in the tech sector. nanotech and what have you. And that being the case, and this might be a little too futuristic, but I thought I'd just pop it out there anyway. Wouldn't it be cool if we were able to develop remote parking lots that, instead of being serviced by shuttle buses, were serviced by autonomous, vehicular pods, if you will, that the traveler would be able to call up, using a cell phone link. I just think that I think it may be cost effective, certainly more than putting in some kind of a light rail system, anything like that, and adaptable, and would also have the ability to create that sort of that optical, in your face type of pizzazz that, a little bit on the cutting edge. So I just share that concept, not necessarily as a direct recommendation, but just to sort of broaden out the thinking on how the airport can really be leveraged in order to make a very broad, impactful statement of what the region is offering and has to offer in the tech field. So that's more editorial than anything else, but thank you for indulging me.
All right, Penny.
Yes.
All right, guys, I think that's it. Appreciate it. Appreciate the update. Maybe we'll have you back when.
To our public meeting.
After the public has a whirl with it, right?
Carm, can we do introductions real quick?
Okay, sorry, we
It's
jumped.
right over that.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Good.
Pat, you want to start?
Sure, Patrick Jordan, General Counsel for the Port. Mike Butler, City mechanic.
Rory Clemens, Schenectady County Manager.
Linda Vonderheide representing Runster County, County Executive Steve McLaughlin.
Andrew Krashik representing Patrick Mann in the city of Detroit.
Paul McDonald with CHA.
Bill Semino with CHA, make sure Paul got out of here alive.
Joe Seaman Graves, representing Mayor Keeler for the city of Coos.
Tom Warner, at large representative in Saratoga County.
Connor Haskin representing Phil Cotterone, Albany County Airport Authority.
Bill Barrett, Town of Clifton Park Supervisor and Public Works Chairman for Saratoga County.
Mark Hammond, Town of Malta Supervisor.
Ron Kim, City of Saratoga Springs Mayor.
Sandy Misowitz, Capital Region Transportation Council Director.
Mike Arthur, New York State DOT Regional Director, Capital Region.
Carm Brazil, CTA.
Patrick Cross, intern with the Transportation Council.
Greg Richard, Region 1 DOT.
Bob Rice, Region 1 DOT.
Andrew Tracy, Capital Region Transportation Council.
Chris Bauer, Transportation Council staff.
And listening in remotely, we have Stephen Maples from the Transportation Council, Larry Schillinger representing CDRPC, Ayla Shermer from the FTA, Bill Trudeau, City of Albany, Carrie Ann Miller from DOT, Dan Lara from the Transportation Council, George McHugh from Town of Queens, Jen Saponis from the Council, Mark Stiglione from CDRPC, Nicole McGrath from Federal Highway, Sean McGuire from the Town of Colony, Steve Feeney from Schenectady County, and Teresa LaSalle from the Transportation Council. That should be everybody. Thank you.
All right, in my zest to do this in an hour, I guess I skipped. Although I think the airport, guys from the airport were pretty good. Privilege of the floor. We don't have anyone signed up, but public, but is there anything? I don't see anybody. Okay. All right, did the presentation. Next is amending the transportation improvement program. We need action on this. Looks like one organization kind of.
I don't know, Carrie, would like to describe what you guys are looking for?
Yeah, mostly, by the way, there's money behind all these. federal money for most of this. The bus, the red line is our BRT, the first BRT that operates between Albany and Schenectady through Niskayuna. Believe it or not, that's 11 years old. Kind of dating myself when I say that, but it's 11 years old. It was the first one. What we're doing is we're using federal money to literally refresh everything from the on-street amenities, upgrading all those, buying new vehicles, and making a series of intersection improvements, which is sort of the calling card of these BRTs. In conjunction with our partners from DOT and the local municipalities, there's several, mainly in Schenectady, that will rebuild the intersection and access points through that. And then the second one is mainly we're at 80 Broadway. What that really is work at that intersection in conjunction with the state and the village of Manans. We do a lot of state worker transportation now, and that's evolved over time. And as we do that, they have remote lots north and south of the city. That is the lot on the northern side that we use to move people to downtown office locations. So lots of federal money involved in that, but it requires to modify the TIP to accept the bond.
Right, and the simplest way is the CDTA is drawing down on their regional set aside of funds to finance these two new projects. Or supplement them in some manner.
Yeah. No questions, we need motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Carbon reduction funding proposal. Another acronym.
Yes, I'll kind of review this real quick. So we've been talking with the planning committee here about options to use a fund source that was created in the bipartisan infrastructure law called the Carbon Reduction Program. These funds, as you could imagine, are specifically earmarked toward decreasing CO2 emissions from on-road highway sources, right? So basically trying to reduce the carbon footprint of our transportation sector, roads, buses, what have you. As part of this new infrastructure law, the DOT is required to develop a carbon reduction strategy that will be developed in consultation with New York's MPOs, amongst others. That's due to Federal Highway by November 15th. Once that's approved by the Federal Highway Administration, any project that we intend to use these funds on have to be consistent with that plan. So as you can imagine, that plan is probably being written. We haven't seen details yet, but we envision it being written pretty broadly to allow as many possible eligible projects as possible. The interesting thing that the federal law did is it said 35% of all the funding coming to New York State would be allocated by assigned to projects essentially by the state DOT, but the remaining 65% was suballocated to MPOs like us. So we have a fund source that we have the ability to assign to local projects using that are consistent with the eligibility. And this is just a short list of the eligible types of projects that you can imagine. It ranges from bike and ped improvements to congestion management strategies, signal projects, electrification type projects. So anything that reduces idling, reduces fuel use, would be eligible for this fund source. The other interesting thing is that the law requires that these funds be specifically spent in the large urban area of our region, which is the Albany Schenectady area. And on the map on screen, it's the kind of brownish, yellowish color, depending on how your eyes see that color. And then we have a second source that goes specifically to the medium-sized urban area, which is Saratoga Springs, which is sort of the light blue. So these funds actually have to be physically spent in these areas in the region. As you see over the 5 years, which is the life of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Albany Schenectady urban area is receiving roughly $6.5 million in funding, and the medium-sized Saratoga Springs about $700,000 over the life of the bill. So as you can imagine, with these relatively small numbers when you think of the cost of a project. It didn't justify having a solicitation for, a call for projects, didn't really seem to be a good use of our time. So the discussions with the planning committee led us to a recommendation that's before you today, which is instead of doing a solicitation and trying to identify new projects for these funds, is to use these funds to support the eligible cost increases on existing transportation improvement program projects. So as you all know, for a number of reasons related to inflation or materials cost increases, complex scopes where you're dealing with right-of-way issues, other challenges, all of these things are leading to higher costs on these projects. And for some project types, particularly those funded through what's called the TAP and the CMAP program, which hopefully you're familiar with, that tends to be the one that we fund a lot of our bike ped projects and roundabout projects through. Those fund sources are actually capped. So if there's a cost increase on those projects funded through those specific federal programs, we have to find other local resources. So we thought that by assigning the carbon reduction funds to fill those gaps, that would be a way to keep the program and the projects moving forward. And then anything that's not spent between now and the next tip update, which believe it or not, we're going to start next year, would then be folded into the broader solicitation if there were to be one, and be assigned to new projects or maybe existing projects in the next tip update. So the action before you would create a new funding block in our current transportation improvement program. Folks could request through the tip amendment process. It'll be assigned to projects on a first come first served basis. But that's how we're proposing to use these resources that are available to us. Any discussion about that? Any questions?
Some of the relief valves, like if, for example, Saratoga County, $700,000, that over the life, that we want to make sure we spend it.
Correct. So we know anecdotally from talking to local sponsors that there's cost increases coming that we haven't even seen come to the table yet. So we fully expect the funds to be spent.
No questions, call for a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Joe? Mark, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Keep going, Sam, you got TFP task force recommendations.
Yes, I will turn this portion of the presentation over to Andrew Tracy. And we'll walk you through the presentation. Go right ahead, Andrew.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to provide an update on the activities of the TIP Task Force, Transportation Improvement Program Task Force. The TIP is the list of federally funded transportation projects. It's updated every 3 years. The most recent update was adopted in September of 2022, and soon after that, all the planning committee members involved were invited to participate in this TIP task force to debrief on the TIP process, on the application process, the scoring process, and the project selection process as well, with the purpose of creating a TIP policy document that would guide us through the next TIP update, which, believe it or not, begins next fall already. So the objective of the TIP task force is on this slide here, to develop a TIP policy document that discusses recommended improvements to how the TIP is developed and managed, to be brought to planning committee and policy board as well for approval. If approved, this document will empower our staff to prepare updates to the TIP application, evaluation, and programming processes consistent with what's written in the TIP policy document. So we've prepared that policy document now. It was recommended to policy board at the last meeting of the planning committee, and we intend to continue the TIP task force as well to discuss other topics, including changes to the TIP amendment process to try to streamline that as well. So if you go to the next slide, the TIP task force has met 4 times so far. The first meeting was soon after the TIP was adopted in late 2022, and we've met 4 times since. Each meeting had a specific function to gather input from the TIP task force and then to present the draft TIP policy document for their consideration. The next few slides have a summary of the document. I believe the full document was included in the mailouts for policy board. I'm going to run through the key points highlighted in the TIP policy document now. These are broken down by different topics relating to the project applications. We're going to look into improvements or alternatives to the online job form application we use. Feedback was generally very positive. There were some challenges with using it. So we're going to look into alternative online platforms for accepting TIP applications. We will reduce the length and complexity of the application wherever we're able to for ease of completion by communities of limited staff resources. And if we're able, we'll begin the project solicitation process earlier to allow more time for project sponsors to put together their applications. Relating to the project summary tables, once the projects were scored, we shared these summary tables with the planning committee and policy board, summarizing all 93 applications and how they shook out in the scoring. Feedback on the summary tables was very positive, so we'll continue to provide members with the summary tables and fact sheets to assist in project selection. We may no longer show the sponsor priority of each project on the fact sheet. There were a lot of challenges relating to that, with certain sponsors expressing it was tough for them to, try to play favorites when they have many competing projects. And we will be sure to update the summary tables and fact sheets based on any changes made to the project scoring process as well. Relating to the project categories, projects were broken down into similar types by categories: pavement projects, bridge projects, bicycle pedestrian projects, and so on. We're going to look into realigning these project categories to be consistent with our upcoming long-range metropolitan transportation plan. We hope to align them with the federally required performance measure focus areas, and this will help sort of streamline the TIP and the long-range plan together. And this will also help us make sure that TIP projects can contribute meaningfully to the federally required performance management areas. We're also going to consider removing the preservation versus beyond preservation label. This is something we'll discuss with DOT. And we have an ongoing complete streets policy that's being developed with one of our other advisory committees, and that will be integrated into the TIP scoring process as well. Relating to the actual scoring process, so right now each project receives a quantitative benefit cost score out of 50 points and a qualitative merit score also out of 50 points for a total of 100 points. The scoring process is pretty time consuming and challenging for staff, and it requires sponsors to provide a lot of data to us for every project. So we're going to look into ways of revising mainly the merit evaluation process to ensure only context appropriate scores are being evaluated for each type of project. This would be similar to how we did our recent Bridge New York solicitation, where we identified 5 key merit scores for each bridge application and then only score those applications for those 5 criteria. We will also consider reevaluating the balance between the benefit cost and merit scores. Right now it's 50-50 for every project type. It might be appropriate to rebalance it for certain project types. Projects that receive locally funded design might be able to receive project delivery merit score. That's something that came up from the TIP task force, so we'll look into that. We're going to remove one of the cost components of the benefit cost calculation that ended up not impacting how the project scored or ranked at all. And finally, the sponsors had positive feedback on the ability to swap funded projects based on their internal priority. So the TIP policy document recommends that that process can continue. Finally, the general recommendations: we want to continue to encourage local members to submit applications for all federally eligible projects to help us document the needs of transportation infrastructure in the region. Last time, I think the ask was about 3 times the available funding, but that helps us demonstrate that the need for transportation is great in our region. We also want to streamline the application process, as I mentioned, wherever possible to reduce burden, especially on staff constrained communities. And we want to continue the discussion on whether we should continue to add design-only projects into our TIP. The most recent TIP had a handful of projects funded only for design and not for construction. This helps get the project started, but it comes with later challenges when the design is complete and identifying construction funding for that project. So that's going to be a future topic for the TIP task force. And finally, we are going to develop a one-stop shop for all TIP process guidance before our next TIP update next fall. So next steps for the TIP task force, we're going to continue to meet to discuss TIP amendments and similar topics. The TIP policy document was recommended by planning committee to the policy board. So once approved, we're going to begin to retool the whole TIP application and project scoring process in advance of the next TIP update, which again is next fall. So we hope to have all that wrapped up by next summer. And the TIP task force will continue to meet bi-monthly moving forward to discuss amendment guidelines, TIP fiscal constraint, other fun topics like that. That's all from me and the TIP task force. Does anybody have any questions? Anything at all?
I have a couple comments.
Okay.
I really like the part about the developing the TIP process guidance document.
Okay.
If you want to get more communities involved or whatever, if you can do that like several months before the process starts, so that the community and also like presented for things like superintendent, highway superintendent associations and things like that, so that they know about what they need to do. And the other one was you were looking at getting rid of the preservation for beyond versus beyond preservation, and I'm just wondering, how does the Petron Island Bridge redo work with that, where it's not gonna be complete streets, but it's not a pavement only? So there's gonna be some state projects that are gonna have problems in that.
Right, so that's something that we hope that the complete streets policy might address, is identifying what facilities are in a complete streets context and which ones are. So obviously, you know, an interstate highway shouldn't have a sidewalk on it, for example. So we're hoping to identify which facilities are in a complete streets context and would benefit from that full merit evaluation, and which ones aren't and can have a streamlined evaluation process. And we'll be working with DOT on that.
I know this is very dry, so I apologize for that. However, just keep in mind that everything that we're doing with respect to the work that Andrew laid out is to sort of modernize our process for how we're assigning these federal funds to projects. And that's why it's important. You know, remembering that on the federal highway side, we probably have about $70 to $90 million a year to assign to projects. And on the Federal Transit Administration side, there's probably another fair amount of $50, $60, $70 million a year. So, you know, this whole discussion is really setting us up to update our materials, modernize our approaches, so that next year when we get to the point of soliciting and looking for what the project needs are out there, it'll help all of you to understand and all of our sponsors in the region to understand what the expectations are, and then ultimately how we're going to actually go through the steps we're going to take to actually program and assign projects, funding the projects. So hopefully that, I know this is a little dry, but hopefully, you know, the bigger context will come through in the end.
Everyone's got what they need. Call for a motion.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Air quality update. I think this is our neighbors to the north, right?
Correct. This is about as bureaucratic as it gets, and I'm gonna turn it over to Chris.
Okay, well, so we're here to talk about our latest air quality conformity determination document, which was in your agenda packet, if that's something you want to get more into detail with. And as Harm mentioned, this is related to an action from our MPO neighbors to the north, the Adirondack Glens Falls Transportation Council, and you're probably asking yourself, why are we doing that? And I'm hoping to explain it succinctly here, without getting too into case law and the Clean Air Act and all that, but hopefully I'll be able to do that. So just a little bit of background here, our air quality non-attainment area, as you can see on the cover of this, I know it's in the packet, includes a larger geographic area than just the the Capital Region Transportation Council region. It also includes Greene County, Schoharie County, Montgomery County. And also, the portion of Saratoga County, which is the town of Monroe and village of South Glens Falls, which falls within AGFTC's MPO region. So it's just a little tiny little part of the northeastern corner of Saratoga County. And per a 2010 agreement that we have with AGFTC, we're responsible for executing their air quality requirements in that small portion of Saratoga County. Every time we do a new TIP or a new MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, we have to update this document in order to stay above our federal air quality requirements. AGFTC is adopting a new MTP, and that required us to update this. In the past, our MTP updates were in sync with theirs, so this sort of happened in the background, and when you approve this in the past, it just was something that we did together. This time, we're a little off sync. We're doing ours next year. They're finishing theirs this year. This was the update of this pretty much is pulling together the most recent list of projects on our TIPs and any projects that are in our MTPs. Adirondack Glens Falls MTP is mostly policy-based like ours. When we update it, we have to do it in coordination with New York State DOT's Environmental Science Bureau, AGFTC, of course, and New York State DOT Regions 1, 2, and 9. Then we have to share that with the New York State Interagency Consultation Group, which is the group that oversees air quality decisions in New York. It's made up of FTA, FHWA, EPA, DEC, and New York State DOT. They reviewed and concurred with the contents of the document. We had a 30-day public comment period, we being New York State DOT and Transportation Council, which was from August 2nd to September 5th. We received no public comments. AGFTC's public comment period is open, and that will close when they adopt their new MTP in a couple of weeks. So our proposed action today is to approve by resolution the new Albany, Schenectady, Troy 1997 8-hour ozone non-attainment area transportation air quality conformity determination, which I won't try to say again. And just to clarify, this does not impact our air quality attainment status in any way. Doesn't impact the exempt or non-exempt status of any of your projects, and it doesn't impact the regional non-attainment boundaries. So happy to answer any questions if I can.
Chris, I think you snuck this one right by.
It's a highly controversial recommendation.
And I'm the newest member of that. In this, that draft.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Motion,
I'll make the motion.
Tom, second,
Second.
all's in favor.
Aye.
Okay, regional truck parking study status.
Yeah, so the timing of our meetings don't always coincide well with some of the wrap up of some of our planning work, but we do have a truck parking study that is soon to be wrapping up, and I thought, Chris might have a minute or two to kind of describe what's going on.
Sure. So, okay, I'll just try to be quick here. As Sandy mentioned, we're in the final stages of the regional truck parking study. This was a study that was originally kind of came out of our freight plan in 2016, and then in 2021, we did a survey with our freight advisory committee, the planning committee, and policy board, and this was the freight planning initiative that was the one that was selected. The objectives of the study were to inventory public and private supply for overnight truck parking. So think long haul trucks. This is not like trucks parking at the curb to drop off goods, although we would like, that's curbside management. We'd love to study that in the future sometime with someone as well. But this particular study was about long haul overnight truck parking. And we really were trying to understand the trends and factors that drive overnight truck parking in our region. Because for example, a truck driver parking overnight in our region that's at a midpoint somewhere in their journey has much different needs than a driver who's making a delivery or picking or pick up within our region. And so we're trying to understand more about that and make recommendations to improve overnight truck parking and address the underlying issues. In other words, not just say, okay, we need 500 more truck parking spaces. That wasn't really the objective of the study. Just a couple highlights of the study. First of all, when you leave, I encourage you to check out the poster in the vestibule out here. That was presented at our NICEAMPO conference that talks a little bit more about the approach. which was really a data-driven approach. We purchased location-based truck parking data from the American Transportation Research Institute, that's ATRI. And we use that to create truck parking supply and demand profiles for all of the major truck parking areas, either in our region or just outside of our region. We had a buffer because a lot of the truck parking demand is met just about within 5 miles outside of our region. And just some highlights. First of all, we're about 95% overnight capacity, which means we don't really have a major problem now. But it's something that we probably want to keep an eye on in the future as we're kind of like right at that tipping point, close to 100%. We identified 3 areas of concern, and I don't mean to raise too much concern about these, but just 3 areas of like, hey, it seems like truck parking is a little bit more in higher demand in these areas. And those are I-87 at the northern end of the region. I think Wilton, Wilton Truck Stop, Scotty's. And that has a lot to do with the limited truck parking capacity between our region and the Canadian border. The second area is the area near the I-88 and New York 7 interchange in Rotterdam. That's related a little bit more to staging and deliveries. We see a little bit of curb park or shoulder parking in that out there, truck stops that are over capacity. And the third was I-90 from the New York Thruway east to Massachusetts. Think Skodak and east out there. And again, it has a lot to do with what's actually happening outside of our region, in that there's very limited capacity in Massachusetts. Long haul truck drivers know this and try to kind of hedge their bets, if you will, as they're traveling to that region. The recommendations for the study include seeking opportunities to expand parking areas, that's public and private, in the areas of concern. Again, it's and this is explained in much more detail in the report. It's not to spend millions of dollars to build new lots. We all know it's not a high priority for our very limited funding. We also have recommendations to incorporate truck parking and staging for deliveries into the development process. This is where something that might be of more interest to you in the room. We have some future initiatives to look at, such as emergency planning for truck parking. This comes up occasionally. Hasn't been a huge issue in our region, but has happened in upstate New York, Buffalo area, Rochester area, where snowstorm kind of took people by surprise, and having those plans in place about where you might want to park these trucks when they can't move is a good thing. And some resiliency recommendations related to truck parking electrification. Just wanted to say a quick thank you to those of you who participated in the SAC. I know some of you in the room participated directly, or members of your organizations did. We also had great participation from the Trucking Association of New York and the Owner Operators Independent Drivers Association, and some other private industry members from our Freight Advisory Committee, like Golub and some others who gave us some really good inputs. We appreciate that. The current status for the draft report, we have that. We're reviewing it internally. After we finish our round of edits that we need to do here, we'll release the final for SAC review and then a 30-day public review. As Sandy mentioned, didn't really align well with a policy board meeting, but we're also finalizing a toolkit, which is aligned with the recommendations that I think will be actually of most interest to your planners and your municipal staff. And hoping to have that all out and done before the next policy board meeting. So it's kind of a lot jam-packed there, and they're trying to get it done here, but happy to answer any questions. Encourage you to check out the poster. And we'll make sure we share all of that, the deliverables once they become available.
Anybody have any truck questions for Chris? None. Good job, Chris. Thanks. Okay, the regional transportation planning initiatives. Sandy, what do you got besides 4 or 5 things you share?
Yes, we have a lot going on this fall. We have the update of our congestion management process, which is a document that's sort of required under federal law for an MPO of this size. But what it really gets to, in essence, is identifying the most congested corridors in the region and identifying some strategies to help alleviate the challenges, and reviewing this through the lens of cost-effective solutions, right? So think things like signal improvements, low cost, big bang for the buck kind of improvements. What we're not looking at is mass widenings. We're not looking at adding a bunch of capacity all over the region to fix congestion. That's not the philosophy that you'll see. But this project will hit public review in the next month or so. And then we'll be coming back to you in the fall at the December meeting to share more details on that. I think it'll be of interest to you folks to see where the locations are, some of which are probably you all well know in your neck of the woods where the problem spots are, but to see it in context for the whole region might be of interest to you folks. We're also updating a coordinated human service transit plan, which focuses on providing and coordinating as much as we can transportation services for those with disabilities, for those who are elderly, those who do not drive. That plan is also going to be out for public review in the next month or so, and it will also be bringing that to you in December for approval. We're also updating our public participation plan, which definitely is sort of an updated and refresh of that document that will also be coming to you in December. And then on the sort of the fund planning stuff side, we're updating our beginning update, and we talked about this before, of our regional transportation plan. We'll have a story map to share with you that sort of outlines the existing conditions in the region and sort of tells the story of where we are today to set the stage for where we're going to be going in the future. And over this next year in particular, we're going to be talking a lot about envisioning what the future of the transportation system here is for the capital region. The ultimate goal is to have a plan adopted by September of 2025, but when you back up from there, the bulk of the work really gets done in 2024. So I know we have a number of planning initiatives going on in the region. We're doing the best we can to coordinate them all. State Transportation Master Plan, CDTA's Transit Development Planning work. There's a number of things you just heard from the airport. We do intend over the next year to continue to bring agency presentations to you folks to understand where our partners all are. So, you know, we'll be reaching out to like the Thruway Authority and some of the others we don't often hear from to hear what their long-term plans are. So that'll feed into the conversation. And then we'll be, you know, working through a variety of means to build this new and rebrand. Really, for those of you who've been around for a long time, you've heard the term New Visions for 30 years. I've been here now 25 years, and I look outside my window, it looks pretty much the same as it did 25 years ago. So I think the notion of a new vision, we need to reframe the conversation, think about this a little differently, think about where we are as a region, where we're going. And I think there's an interesting opportunity to sort of rebrand and refresh that document. And then on the solicitation front for the planning side, we are going to be issuing a call for community planning projects, complete street workshop participants, some other activities this fall. We're hoping to make maybe $300,000 or so available for local planning. I know capacity is very limited in the local government world right now from a staffing and resource perspective, but we'll put that call out probably after October 1st, our next planning committee meeting. And that will help build our next work plan for the upcoming year. But I do envision 2024 being heavily geared towards the work that Andrew went over with the TIP and updating all those resource documents, working on developing the long-range transportation plan. And as an aside, we're also going to be kicking off our Safe Streets and Roads for All grant initiative. The RFP I expect to go out any day now. And we'll be spending a lot of time over this next year on building a regional Vision Zero safety plan. So there's a lot happening. Stay tuned, but I think, you know, I know some of these things can get dry, but I think there'll be a lot of exciting stuff coming in the next few months. So I'll stop there.
Any questions for Sandy? Great. CDRPC, Laura, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm right here. Can you hear me and see me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
We really
well,
want to see you? Oh,
I guess
okay,
that's
all
good
right.
enough.
Yeah, we can see you.
Now we can see you.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for that. I've got just 4 brief bullet points to mention on behalf of the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, I'm happy to report that of just under 400 metropolitan statistical areas, MSAs around the country, Capital Region is one of the 67 MSAs that received a EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So a multi-year program. City of Albany, as the largest municipality, had the authority and graciously designated CDRPC to receive the funds and coordinate the program. We're coordinating closely with all our partners, including the Transportation Council, and we expect to be rolling out the program in the coming months and tying it into our various projects under the state-funded climate, smart, and clean energy programs. Secondly, reporting on regional broadband planning. CDRPC has received a pass-through grant from the New York State Department of State to support broadband planning and build out in Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady counties. So what we're going to be doing is working with a consulting firm to coordinate with the 4 counties to identify those areas for priority broadband build out, so that when federal and state funding allocations become available, we're ready to hit the ground running. Thirdly, on the issue of the census, if you might recall, at our last meeting, I was able to report that the U.S. Census Bureau had released sort of that first cut of information relating to actual population figures, and they rushed that out because that's so integral to the reapportionment process. And then the more detailed stuff has finally been released. That lays out, geographic and age cohort projections for the region. CDRPC is partnering with the Cornell Program of Applied Demographics to prepare updated projection models. We should be able to share the results of that in the coming months. Preliminarily, we'll be focusing now on the long-term trends that we already see of lower birth rates and an increasing size of our aging population. And lastly, but not leastly, on October 20th, the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, in partnership with the New York Planning Federation, is hosting a planning and zoning workshop at Hudson Valley Community College. And for those who are interested, registration is now open. And with that, I'll turn it back over.
Questions for Larry? Thanks. Hey, for CDK, just a couple things. Our ridership continues to grow. We're 15 to 18% month after month growth, and in fact, we're higher than we were before the pandemic began. Lots of reasons for that, but a lot of it is support of everyone in the community. We appreciate that. Our Purple Line BRT, our third bus rapid transit project, all of which approvals come through the Transportation Council. So we appreciate that, but that's getting ready to open. It'll open early November. If you drive along the corridor, you cannot miss the stations that are purple and silver. They're phenomenal. They include heated sidewalks and all kinds of infrastructure, cameras, things that are tied into the community as well. You may also have noticed that we built a roundabout. First time we ever did that, built a roundabout at the entrance, Cross Gates Mall, that facilitated better flow of traffic through there. So far, so good. I guess the real test will be during the holidays, but all's well. And is done. It won't be open until November. We built the first busway, bus only lane through the University of Albany. It's about a mile long, exclusive right of way that just bisects the campus, and it's really going to change the nature, I think, of ridership and how people move along that corridor. So that's something I feel has been the missing piece, missing part of what we do. Exclusive right of way, and who knows what that may end up in. So a lot of investment. It's an $80 million project, and it's ready to go. And then lastly, similar type project, a mobility hub in downtown Schenectady, right at the base of State Street. We're calling that the Gateway Mobility Hub. It'll be really the assembly point for all of our mobility products, whether it be buses, bikes, cars, lots of customer amenities. And we work with Metroplex so that it is consistent with the development that's gone on around that location. If you haven't been down there, there's all kinds of development at the base of State Street. And that's where the red line that we talked about earlier starts and ends. I think that's gonna open probably within the next month or so. So it's another $5-8 million investment. So you can see a lot of these investments are in the community as well with this stuff. So we rebuilt all the sidewalks. We did 2 intersections, re-signaled everything. So those are the kinds of projects that we think that we're best to bring to the table. It's not just about us, it's about, the community. So if you have a need, you have an idea, we're all ears. Great, we'll keep moving right along. You all know Mike Arthur. Mike's the new regional director at Region 1. If you don't have his phone number, get it. I'm sure you're gonna, sorry, Mike. They're gonna need you at some point.
Thanks,
What's
Carl.
going on, DLT?
Few things going on. Reimagining I-787. You may have seen the social media blitz we've had on that. We had our first public meeting on June 27th at the MVP Arena in the media room, and we had over 200 people there. A lot of good comments were gathered, and that's all been taken back by the consultants, and they're working through that. We've had numerous other meetings, follow-up meetings in the neighborhoods and areas downtown Albany, and we're continuing to collect data from the locals and the outreach groups. Route 378, we have a planning and environmental linkage study, and we have a final public meeting on October 26th at Hudson Valley Community College, 6 p.m. We are struggling to hire like everyone else, but we do have some new hires in our planning group. We have Kaylee Knoll in our planning section, and Randy Milano in local programs just came to us from the city of Albany. A lot of construction projects, as you've probably seen in the capital district. It's going pretty well this season. A lot of successful projects are winding down. A couple of notable ones. We have Route 9P in Saratoga. Union Avenue is picking back up after the track season winding down. We're doing pavement maintenance and shoulder widening. Median curb work and final paving are coming up shortly. The Glen Ridge Road Railroad Bridge that gets hit quite often now has an overheight vehicle detection system that just went active last week. It has a infrared laser. If you trip that laser, you're gonna send off a bunch of VMS boards and lights and all kinds of things. And hopefully that'll deter some of the hits that we've been getting on that bridge. So that press release just went out last week, and that system is now active. Overhead sign structures, we have contractors that are working on foundations and signs. We're replacing a bunch of our overhead sign structures in the capital district. And a bunch of other highway projects and bridge projects. You've probably seen them in your travels, but everything's going well this season, so knock on steel. That's about it. We got a couple more weddings coming up in October. Route 378 over the Hudson, which is a bridge painting project, and Water Street over the D&H Railroad. Good season overall.
Questions for Mike? Everything's fair except the Glenville Bridge. Good job, guys. Right here.
Thruway is not present.
Craig's
there.
not here. Okay, we'll skip the throughway. Connor, you got anything else?
Just thank you for listening on that. If you want any more information, we do have the website active, www.aob-master-plan.com. All the draft chapters, ways to comment, ways to reach me. If you have any further information from there you want to share, please feel free. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks for the update. Last but not least.
You want quicker?
You want to be long?
I know.
You want to be long-winded?
Go through my list as quick as I can. Since the last time we met, we've had a lot of visits, political and otherwise, down at the port, mostly for the expansion project, but a lot relating to just supply chain issues that the country, kind of found out about in the last 2 or 3 years in the port. For our area is kind of the focus of trying to solve those problems. Just highlight that Secretary of the Interior Howland came with the Congressman Tonko, and they brought a phalanx of federal officials to try to see what we're doing and kind of try to shake the money trees of the state and the feds on how to fix the giant gap that we have in funding for the offshore wind project that's been in the paper for a while now. The price, as everybody around the room knows, of steel, cement, asphalt, everything has just skyrocketed the project. So we're looking on all of our partners to try to assist us through that. In addition to those folks, we had a meeting with several members of the British Parliament and a separate meeting with the Consul General and her staff from Britain, to start to talk about interaction between overseas ports and us and ports in general and offshore wind, and specifically. For those of you who've been down in the port, you know where things are, but Shed 1 is our largest on-river facility. It's about 60,000 square feet. It's one of the original buildings in the port, about almost 90 years old. It has never been touched except for a few skylights put in over the years. Coming short of demolishing it, which would have cost more, we basically, not we, other people besides me, rebuilt the entire shed in the last 6 months, except for some of the paneling. So new roof, electric, fire suppression, and floor capacity. So that shed is going to be coming back online 100%. It's only been used about 50%, probably in the last decade, at least since I've been at the port. The pounds per square foot was improved considerably. The port brings a lot more heavy stuff than it used to. So the sheds that are close to the water need to have a higher floor capacity. Exciting news for us. We received our DEC permits last week. That was our final environmental permits, ending the review process for the offshore wind expansion, which means that we are basically fully live. All contractors now can do what they want anywhere on the site to finish out our pad ready project portion of this. So we're not going to build the buildings until some of the monies are ironed out, but that means all infrastructure can now go in, all the wetland permits, everything else. We're going to start the bridge over the Norman's Kill to the site, either late fall or early winter. Some long lead items on that have to still come through. And we are in the middle of our terminal and infrastructure, internal roadway reconstruction. The terminal hasn't been touched in decades, and that is almost complete. That was a full repaving of, I think, over 10 acres, and all new stormwater systems and a lot of rail improvement inside the terminal. Outside the terminal, if you come to the port, hopefully in 2 months, it'll go from what looks like really a third world roadway. Right now, you're dodging potholes every 10 feet to a complete soup to nuts redo. It'll go down. I think they're going to dig down 10 feet in most sections and build it up so the trucks that do come in right now won't do the damage that they've been doing in the last 10 or 20 years, because their cars keep getting heavier. So that is removing some rail crossings, rebuilding rail crossings, all new water and sewer infrastructure rebuilds, basically to try to help our tenants move around, but also to bring trucks and buses easier through the port. It's usually the complaint about fuel trucks and buses, where between, I think, my office and to get back onto Pearl Street, we had eight or nine rail crossings. We're going to get that down to 6, and some of them that can be controlled differently, so you can hopefully just go right over them. So less stops in the port for hazardous crossings. So that both of those together, I think, are about $6 million worth of, or $16 million worth of improvements. So that's Smith Boulevard in front of us and Boat Street, which is towards the county sewage treatment plant. And then either the end of the next year, early 2024, we're going to go from where the railroad buildings are around the corners and all the way down through the city and through the town of Bethlehem, down Norman's Kill, down a new bridge. So that's another mile either widening or complete reconstruction. So you'll be able to move much more comfortably and efficiently by halfway through next year through almost all of the port's interior roads. Thank you.
Any questions Pat, about the port? Yeah, we refuse to send any more buses down there because we lost them. They were deep. Any other projects off the floor, or anything that, you know, is worth mentioning that's hopefully going well? Past the hour time limit, I
I
guess.
think so.
Upcoming, way past, upcoming meetings.
Yeah, we just have a series of meetings on your agenda after transportation, our community planner forum. Next planning committee meeting is October 4th, and as I mentioned, we'll be presenting a couple of these planning activities at those upcoming meetings. So, looking forward to having you, if not you personally, but your staffs and various representatives engaged in all these processes.
Great.
That's it.
I think unless there's questions or any comments, we can get a motion to adjourn.
I'll echo that, the 787 studies, I went to both of the public, I know you went to Carmen, they were very well
Oh, yeah.
done. Very well attended. I think everything you needed to see, you know, would come from the port side and from the south end, Albany side and others. So I think that was well done by Creighton May, but certainly very well done by your staff. I know the guys behind you were front and center on, so we appreciate that.
Can do a long load.
Arm said you could borrow some of his money.
I don't think so. I think Mr. Barrett has a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second,
Second.
Truman. All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a great rest of the summer.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.